Hey! Welcome to another devlog about the medieval village building game I'm making using my own game engine. As usual, real life makes everything to prevent me from releasing videos on a consistent schedule. I hope you're not too mad about it. One thing that happened is we got 2 black kittens. They are incredibly lovely, but for the first weeks it seemed as if I haven't slept at all because of them playing at night. Anyway, we ended the last devlog with the first iteration of some UI for the game. It's definitely not the final look of the UI. The important thing is that I now have a solid framework to create the UI really fast. And after working on the UI for so long, I decided that I deserve some rest and I can work on whatever I feel like working on, instead of, working on something that's actually important right now. And of course I decided to try and improve the grass. Now, a lot of people have been telling me that this grass looks more like random wooden spikes painted in green, rather than actual grass, and, well, it's hard to disagree with them. The reason I'm using such a simple grass mesh is that a mesh that actually looks good will contain hundreds of vertices, and it will be rather costly for the rendering engine. You might be thinking, why not use a grass texture instead? Isn't that what everybody is doing? Well, you see, somewhere in the beginning of this project I decided that I don't want to use textures at all. This might sound stupid, but there are actually a few good reasons for that. The first reason is that because I'm using my own game engine, using textures means I need to actually implement textures first, which means managing texture atlases, maps and a ton of other stuff. The second and probably most important reason is that using vertex-colored models with no textures means that asset creation should in theory take less time for me, simply because there are much fewer parameters to work with. Of course, this has a downside, that for any extra visual detail on my models I have to add extra geometry, which makes the model more costly to render, especially if these models appear frequently on the screen. So, for a while I was committed to not using textures, but that's a decision I made almost a year ago. My vision for the game's look has evolved since then, and I decided to try use some textures and just see how it goes. After all, this is just an artistic choice. You definitely can make a great looking game without using textures. I just realized that it's not the look I want for my game. So I implemented some basic texture support in my engine, and after several iterations I settled on this grass texture. And this is how the new grass looks in-game. It isn't too noisy, but it's still clearly visible, and now it actually looks like grass. I think the shadows look especially nice with these new textures. Of course, you can still see that the mesh is just 3 textured rectangles, but honestly I don't really care. By the way, if we crank up the grass density, it starts to look really awesome, but it really messes up with a lot of things in the game, so I'll probably not use that much grass. So, satisfied with how the grass looks, I decided to push it further and redesign the trees. This wasn't easy. I worked a lot on making good leaf textures and on distributing them uniformly on the tree model. I also figured a fun way to make procedural tree bark textures in GIMP. And after several days, my forests changed from this to this. I don't know about you, but I really like the new look. It's so cozy and fluffy, and it generally feels like a lot of work was put into it. Achieving this without textures would be a nightmare. At this point I was pretty sure that I am gonna use textures in my game, but there was a problem. Now every object that doesn't have textures looks completely out of place. So I went on and added textures for cut grass model, hay model and hay bedding model. They are all a bit subtle, but they definitely improve the visuals a lot and remove the feeling that, something is missing from these models. Now I couldn't just slap a texture for the campfire model. That would look kinda stupid. So instead I decided to implement support for custom shaders for some models, and the fire shader basically generates a scrolling fractal purling noise to make the fire look more realistic. I'm a bit worried that this fire has much higher visual detail density compared to other objects in the game, but I think I'll deal with that later. By the way, I didn't redesign this flying marshmallow, smoke particles yet, because I'm not sure exactly how I want them to look. Though I did fix a bug related to them. Due to how my engine works, you can theoretically select any 3D object in the game with the mouse. However, it doesn't really make sense for smoke particles to be selected, so I added a special component that turns off mouse picking for them. Oh, and I'm not touching the human models for now, because they're completely temporary anyway. Now that most stuff in the game has some textures, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the terrain. I think I don't want to have a different texture for each terrain type, because then I'll have to figure out how to blend these textures and it will make the terrain mesh and shaders much more complicated. But something definitely has to be done with the terrain, because right now it just looks way too flat. I fiddled a bit with different options and ended up using a subtle fractal blue noise texture. It creates some color variation and removes the flatness of the terrain without being too distracting. After that I was really happy with the new look of the game, but I suddenly remembered something. In the beginning of the project I was playing with some toon shading and outlines, and the code for that is still in the project, it's just disabled. I decided to try and turn on the outlines and soften them a bit, and they completely transformed the picture. Before that I was simply happy with how the game looks, but now I feel like I'm actually in love with it, and I'm extremely excited to continue working on it. That's typical game development for you. Sometimes you just need to try new things or even try old things that didn't work before. Now the plan is to add a whole ton of content to reach a certain playable state for the game. Don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed it and subscribe if you're interested in this project. And I'll see you in the next devlog.